Hey, so Boker Tov, today's Daf Yomi is Kiddushin, Nun Ches, Kiddushin 58. Today's Daf Yomi, we're going to start on Nun Ches Amud Aleph, around 10 lines from the top, where Mar Yehuda found Ashkechenu. Mar Yehuda, Rav Yosef, or Rav Shmuel, prayed to Rav Bar Chana. So Mar Yehuda found Rav Yosef from Shmuel, the son of Rav Bar Chana. They were standing at the entrance to Rabba's house, to Rabba's base medrash, to his yeshiva, and Amr. And so he said to them, so Rabbi Yehuda, they call him Mar Yehuda. So Mar Yehuda says to them, Tanya, we learned, Hamakadesh, Pepetach Hamor, Basar Becholav, Ubechulin, Shenishchatu Ba'azara. Let's say you try to betroth a woman with Petach Hamor, with a firstborn donkey, with a meat and milk, or with non-sacred food that was slaughtered in the courtyard. Rabbi Shimon says Mikudeshes. Rabbi Shimon says in all these cases that it's going to be a valid betrothal. Because Rabbi Shimon said, remember, we said in yesterday's daf that if the Petach Hamor, that if the donkey was still alive, you're allowed to have benefit from it. So therefore, we see from here, Rabbi Shimon must be in the position that you're allowed to have benefit from meat and milk, or chulin that was slaughtered in the temple, or Petach Hamor. Whereas the Chum say, Ein Mekudesh. The Chum say it's not enough to get benefit from it. So we see from here, says Mar Yehuda, to Shmuel, the son of Rabbi Bar Chana, to Rabbi Yosef. We see from here that, according to Rabbi Shimon, Alma chulin shenishchata ba'azara lav. Rabbi Shimon lav diarai. So we see from here that, according to Rabbi Shimon, if you have chulin that was slaughtered in the courtyard of the temple, it's not biblical. But how could that be the case? But we have a contradictory source, because we have a contradictory source. Rabbi Shimon says, chulin shenishchatu ba'azara yisrafu. The contradictory source, Rabbi Shimon says, if you have chulin that was slaughtered in the courtyard of the temple, then you have to burn it. And the fact that he says that you have to burn it, as Rashi says, well, sagi levikfura, it's not enough just to bury it. So we see from here, says Rashi, that it has to be, that it must be, that it's a biblical prohibition. Because if you're going to say it's Rabbanan, would we be so strict as to make you burn it? But so, meaning to say, if it was really a biblical prohibition, a rabbinic prohibition, we have to burn it. And if it was just a rabbinic prohibition, it would be enough to bury it. That's how Rashi explains it. And so to a chaya shenishchata zara, so too if there's an animal like a chaya, which is like a gazelle or a deer that was slaughtered in the courtyard of the temple, that also needs to be burned, which means to say that it's a biblical prohibition and not a rabbinic prohibition. So these items, Rabbi Shimon in the first source says chulin shenishchatu ba'azara is only rabbinically prohibited, and therefore it's a valid betrothal. Whereas here in this brisa, Rabbi Shimon is saying that it is a biblical prohibition. That's why he's saying to be burnt. Well, let's read the Rashi. Yisrafu sagi lahu b'kvura. It's not sufficient to bury it. We see from here, Alma Itzur min Torah. Must be that it's biblical. The imid rabbanon. If we would just say that it's rabbinically prohibited to have benefit from chulin that was slaughtered in the courtyard, we would be indeed so strict. True, by an animal, we would be strict because we might come to say that something that's disqualified the temple, the lo nemru kachim psulin nikbar. We don't want to say that if it was a disqualified kachim, it's buried. Elachaya, but achaya ikar isur dida avdiaraisa. If the main idea of it is not biblical, why would we say to burn it? Haleko migzar atu kachim. It could never be kachim. Why would it be required to be burned. Why would it be required to be burned? Efshar, or we have to change the Rashi. Efshar, Bigfur would be possible to be buried. Alvada Isur Min Torah. It must be that these cases are biblically prohibited to have benefit. Usrei Fasan Midivrei Sofrin. And so therefore we're burning it rabbinically. Behema gazer, by an animal, we're going to be strict. Because maybe people might come to say that if it was a disqualified hektish, it has to be buried, and the Torah says it should be burnt. And by Achaya also, the rabbis made a decree, they shouldn't draw distinctions with chulin that was slaughtered in the courtyard. But the Chachamim said in all their cases that their stringency should be like biblical laws. So therefore, Rabbi Shimon is saying it must be, according to this source, Rabbi Yehuda is saying, Rabbi Shimon is saying it must be that chulin shenishchatu b'azara is biblically prohibited. So we have a contradiction. Is he saying it's biblically prohibited or rabbinically prohibited? So this is what Mar Yehuda brought to Rav Yosef and to Rav Shmuel Berei de Rabbah. And so the Berei de Rabbah Bar Chana. And so when he brought this question to them, ishtiku, they were quiet. Also, kame de Rabbah, they came to Rabbah. Rabbah says to them, oh, Rabbah brings them, they go inside to Rabbah's house, and Rabbah says to them, Amar lahu, he says to them, Palga ukminchi, this Palga, this Mar Yehuda is a Palga, meaning to say he's like an argumentative person. That's what you're bringing to me, Palga ukminchi? That's the person, that's what got you quiet. It's not a difficulty at all. So, Hachamai Askina, what are we talking about here? Why in this case is he saying that it needs to be burnt? Why do Rabbi Shimon say mikudesh? Just why in the case of Rabbi Shimon say it's betrothal? It's not because he says chulin shenishchatu ba'azara in general is only rabbinically prohibited, but in this case it was never capable of being chulin, because once they slaughtered it, they discovered that it was a treifa. Rabbi Shimon follows his logic, because we say with Rashi says with respect to kisui adam and also espano, but chamisha, and if the shlita was not capable of being eaten, it's not called a shliya. And so therefore the chiyuv, the isur, the obligations and the prohibitions that come upon it as a result of the shlita don't take effect because it wasn't a shlita. So therefore, in this case, the prohibition of chulin didn't come upon it, because the prohibition of chulin comes through the shlita, but in this case, it wasn't a shlita. And so therefore, there's not going to be a prohibition of benefit from it. And so therefore, you can betroth a woman with it. That's what Rabbi Shimon's position is. Rabbi Shimon says, so Rabbi Shimon says in those cases, it wasn't a shlita, so it's permitted to have benefit from it. The Chachamim prohibit it. Says the Gemara, Machran v'kidesh b'dmei mikudeshes. Let's say he took these cases which the Chachamim say, you know how to benefit from it, like the meat and all of these cases that we were referring to, these Asuriya, and you betroth the woman with it, it's going to be a valid betrothal. Gemara asks the question, what's her source? Minoan. Gemara explains, I'll tell you how we know this, because by idolatry, if you take something that's idolatry, and it says about it, that if you transfer its monetary value onto money, it will become cherem, something that needs to be destroyed, just like the idolatry. Anything that comes from it, will have the same law as the idolatry. So since we say this by idolatry, the kol yisurim shebetorah sharu, and on all other cases, all the prohibitions of the Torah will be permitted. Gemara says, wait 1 second. Why don't we learn from the idolatry that just like the idolatry is prohibited, the money that the idolatry is transferred onto, also everything else is. Gemara says, no, we're not going to say that, because this law doesn't only apply to idolatry, it also applies to the fruits of the sabbatical year. And we're saying that anytime there's two laws, a law that's said twice, then it's going to fit into the category of two verses that teach us the same thing. And anytime we have two verses that teach us the same thing, we don't learn anything from it. Avodas kochavim ha'chavarant. The idolatry is that which we just said. And Shvius Mahi, what's the law of the sabbatical year? Where do we see that that if you take something that's prohibited because of sabbatical year fruit and you try to sell it, then the money then gets the sanctity of the sabbatical year fruit? Because it says Yovel hi kodesh yelochem, ma kodesh tofes estamav. Just like something which is hektish, it assumes the power on the money it's transferred to. Also Shvius, also sabbatical year tofes estamav. It assumes the value of the money. Well, the Gemara says, well, ima kodesh tofes estamav yotzechum, but by hektish, the power goes onto the money, the sanctity, and then the hektish item itself becomes non-holy. So too, Avshvi is tofesis tamea v'yatzachul. Maybe sabbatical year also, its money its sanctity gets transferred to the money, and it becomes chulin. Tamar tiyeh tavayasateh. It should be in its status of sanctity. So even though the sanctity is transferred to the money, the shavius remains sacred. So the Gemara explains how this works. Ketzad, so he buys, let's say he has grapes that grew in the sabbatical year, and he buys meat with it. Both of them have the law of biur, of they need to be destroyed when the sabbatical year fruit needs to be destroyed. But then he transfers the meat onto fish. Now the fish has the sanctity of the sabbatical year, even though the meat has lost it. But there goes on to wine. B'yayin shem, and then if the wine was sold for oil, yatsa yayin nechna shem, and the wine no longer is sabbatical year fruit. Now the oil is. Hakate said achron nitfas b'shvius uperi atzmo aso. So the last thing it's sold for, that becomes the sanctity of sabbatical year, and the original fruits also remain prohibited. So the Gemara says, but hani choman damer and this only works according to the position says that there are two verses, we can't derive anything from it. According to the one who says that there are two verses that teach us the same law, we can indeed learn from it. Ma'iko and Meimar, what we in fact learned. Gemara explains, you take sive. The limitation is what's written by the sabbatical year, because it says ksiv hacha ki cherem. It says by idolatry, because it is a cherem. Ksiv hasam yovel hi. He in midiach rinelo. It says by the jubilee year, it is the jubilee year. Yovel hi kodesh yelachem. That is what's considered kodesh, but other things, unlike the idolatry and the sabbatical year, do not have the concept of tofes estameh. Its sanctity is not transferred to the money. So now we're up to the next Mishnah. It says the Mishnah mekadesh b'trumos u'b'maisros u'b'matanos u'b'echatos u'b'efer chatas areiz u'b'kudeshes b'afilu Yisrael. Somebody tries to betroth the woman with truma, that's sacred money, sacred tithe. Maisros is the tithe to the Kohen. Matanos, Trumas to the Kohen, Maestros, generally speaking, to the Levi. Then Matanos, this is the gifts to the Kohen, which are the Zrol, Chaim, and the Kiva, the parts of the animal, the forearm, the jaw, which includes the tongue, the Kiva, the stomach. And then also Mechatas, Ube'efer Chatas. If he tries to betroth the woman with the water of the red heifer, the water that was mixed to make the water of the red heifer, or the ashes that was mixed for the red heifer. All these cases we're going to say it's a valid betrothal. You can betroth a woman with the Afilu Yisrael, even if the person is not a Kohen. So how is he able to do it? The Gemara's assumption at this point, Rashi explains, is that even though he doesn't own any of these things, the Yisrael doesn't own the truma, he has to give it to the Kohen. Nevertheless, he has the right to give it to whichever Kohen he wants. That's called the tovas hana. That's called the gift of the benefit of giving a gift. He has the right to choose who to give it to, and that's something that's quantifiable. And so, therefore, the assumption is that that's a monetary thing. And so, if he gives her the right to give away this truma, that's a value, the right to give a gift. And so, therefore, Therefore, you can betroth the woman with it. So, but Ula comes along and says, actually, tovas hana eina mammon. This right to give a gift, that's not considered money. So he argues with our Mishnah at first glance. But doesn't that argue with our Mishnah? So isn't Ula arguing with our Mishnah, which seems to say that Tovana is something that you can betroth a woman with? So Amrulay, no. Well, it says that's not what our mission is referring to. What's our mission referring to? Be Yisrael shenafu taval mi beis avi mo kohen. Our mission is talking about a case of a person whose grandfather died, and his grandfather was a Kohen, and he left him produce. And even though he didn't separate it yet, Kasav, our author of our mission of the position, even though the tithe wasn't separated, since it was going to be separated, we view it as though it's separated, and so therefore he inherited the truma. And Yisrael is allowed, if a Kohen can sell the truma, and if a Kohen bequeaths it to his grandson, then the grandson could sell that truma. So so now he asks him the question, okay, so is this the right to give a gift, which we call tova sana, is that a monetary commodity that we could quantify or not? We learned in our Mishnah, it seems clearly that it is a right. Yeah, but then we explained that that's referring to a specific case. It's not referring to tova sana. That's referring to actual truma that he has the right to sell. So that's how he answered this question. And so Rav Huna said to Rav Chia bar Avin, "Hutza'at." He said, "You're a hutzah." So Husavar ichsif. So Rav Chia bar Avin got embarrassed. Husavar mishma'ata kamarlei. He thought he was telling him, "Get out, get this teaching out of here. You're bring me bad teaching." But they said, "No, that's what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying to you. I'm only hachi kamina. This is what I'm saying. Rav Asi, the Hutzol Kaigavazech. You're right. We can't bring a proof from our Mishnah because you have Rav Asi from Hutzol. You're saying like him. Then our Mishnah is not talking about Tova Sana. It's talking about where you have actual truma to sell. So the Gemara says, Nema Kitanai. Let's say that this is a machokes Tanaim, whether or not Tova Sana, the right to give a gift, is considered a commodity that you could sell. So as a monetary value, let's say it's a machokas tanayim, magonev tevil shalchaver. Somebody comes along and steals his friend's tevel. He steals the produce that was not yet time. The guy just harvested the grain, but he didn't pile it up yet, and the other guy comes along and steals it. Or actually, he piled it up, but he didn't separate it. So the other guy the robber comes along and steals it. So he stole $1,000 worth of grain. Misham odemei tevil shalchaver. He has to pay him back. That's what Rebbe's position is. But Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda Omer, no, you don't have to pay him back the full $1,000 because you're going to have to give a 40th, a 50th, or a 60th of that to the Kohen. So therefore, you only have to pay him back minus the truma, which was they have to give to the Kohen. So what's their argument? Mar Savar, the position that says that you have to pay him back everything because he had the right to give the truma before. So Tova Sanam Mamon, he has the right to give this gift. So therefore you have to pay him back for it. You have to pay him back for everything. Mar Savar Tova Sana Ena Mamon, the one who says that no, that it's not money. He says you don't have to pay him back for the truma that was in it. The Gemara says no. The Kol Yama Tova Sana Ena Mamon. Everybody says the right to give a gift is not money. V'halcha b'tavam shenafu omi beis avi mo kohen matana shel hormo kameisha hormo dam and kamiflagi. So now here again, we're talking about the fact that this guy inherited the Kohen, this produce from his grandfather was a Kohen, but his grandfather hadn't actually separated yet. And the question is, if you don't actually separate it, do we view it as separated it? Mar Savar Kamisha Hormiadam, the one who says that you have to pay him back for everything. Mar Savar, the one who says that you have to pay him back. So position Mar Savar Kamisha Hormiadam. The position, Rebbe's are the position that when Rebbe says that you have to pay him back from everything, because we said we view it as though he's separated. So basically, you've inherited the truma. The position says that you don't have to. It says he didn't separate his truma yet, so therefore you don't have to give him the truma because you still have to give a truma to the Kohen. That's a first approach. But everybody says it's as though it's separated, and so therefore you stole everything from him. B'tova sana ena mamon, and so therefore you're paying him back for everything because he has the truma there. It's viewed as though it's separately. But so why the Chum say you don't have to pay him back for everything? So the Gemara explains that Rebbe and the Rabban are arguing Shmuel's position. How much of truma are you required to take? Shmuel says you just have to do one kernel of wheat, and so therefore therefore Rebbe's other position you have to pay him back. Um, you have to pay him back for everything because he really only had to take one drop of wheat. But the Marius Adishmol, Marais Adishmol. So therefore, but the Chachamim say that you have to pay him back for everything. And the Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda says you have to pay him back only for the chulin because they don't hold like Shmuel. They say you have to give a full amount of truma. You can't just do one kernel of wheat. So Marius like the Shmuel, Marais like the Shmuel. We buy the same alternatively koyama, Leis like the Shmuel. Nobody agrees with Shmuel. Means everybody says you have to give truma either 140, 150, 160. What's the reasoning for Rabbi? What's the reason why Rabbi says that you have to pay back the full amount? That you have to pay back the full amount. The Kansur Rabbanu Laganov. The rabbis wanted to penalize a thief, even though this guy you're giving it back to, he has to give. He would have had to give truma from some of that, so you didn't really steal his truma. But we penalize the thief and make him pay back the full value. We buy the same to Koyama Islu de Shmuel, or alternatively, everybody could agree with Shmuel. You only have to pay 140, 150, 160. That's the case. So what's the reason why Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda says you only have to pay back the chulin and not the truma? If everybody? So what the reason is, even though everybody says everybody agrees with Shmuel that you only have to pay back one kernel. Why do we make him pay back everything? The rabbis penalized the owner of the field because he shouldn't have kept the food in a state of tevel. He should have tithed it right away, and so therefore, since he didn't do that, the rabbi said you don't have to pay him back for the truma amount, even though he could have just given one drop of wheat. So now we quote our Mishnah. Try to betroth the woman with the truma, the meiser, the gifts, the mechatas, the gifts or the mechatas. They for par, it's a valid betrothal. Alpha Israel, even though he's not a kohen for a minu, but didn't we learn? We learned as follows from another Mishnah in Bechoros that tells us, I know if you take money to be a judge, Dina Batom, your judgments are canceled. If you take money to be a witness, you do so Batela, your testimony is canceled. Ahazos, to sprinkle the ashes of the red heifer, Kaddish Mimemav, or to become betrothed from its waters. Not to become betrothed from its waters. If you take money to sprinkle its ashes or to sanctify its waters, then its water is Meima'ara, its water is going to be considered bad water, putrid water, and its ashes are just regular ashes. So we see from here that you can't use it for monetary value. So how could you possibly betroth the person with it, betroth the woman with it, when we just say that there's no monetary value? So how can our Mishnah say that, I take money for your ashes, for the ashes of the red heifer, whereas our Mishnah says that you can betroth the woman with it? So we see from here and it doesn't matter. So he says one is with respect to when it says that it has a monetary value, we're talking about our case, our Mishnah that says you could betroth a woman with mechatas. That's talking about not the money of the mechatas itself. That's the money for bringing the ashes there, the transportation, the travel expense, or for filling up the water. But the Mishnah in Bechoros that says that you can't take money, that's money for sprinkling it or sanctifying the water. We can infer it because it says over here with the water of the ashes and the Ephra Para, and there it states to sprinkle and to sanctify. So one is you're getting a payment for the labor involved, and one is that you're getting payment for the ritual aspect involved. That you can't do, but for the travel and the bringing it, then you could get money for that. So Hadran Alach Ha'ish Mekadesh. We've completed this second chapter called Ha'ish Mekadesh, and we'll return to you. We will return to Ha'ish Mekadesh. Ha'omer L'Chaveros. So we start the third chapter. Somebody who says to his friend, "Say v'kadesh le'isha pon." Is he his friend? We'll see. He says to his friend, "Go and betroth for me this woman." So the friend goes along and marries her himself. Mekudeshes l'sheni. We're saying that she's betrothed to the second person, not the first. Somebody says to a woman, he says to the woman, you're betrothed to me after 30 days. And then somebody else comes, and he betroths her within 30 days. So, she's betrothed to the second person. And indeed, even if she was a Bas Yisrael and the second person was a Kohen, she can eat from the Truma. If he says you're betrothed to me from now for the next 30 days, his language is opaque. He says from now and after 30 days. Somebody else betrothed her within those 30 days. We say Mekudeshes ve'ena Mekudeshes. We say she's betrothed and she's not betrothed. So we're not sure what she is in that status. And she's betrothed to both of them. So Rashi says she's going to be prohibited to both of them unless one gives her a get. And to somebody else, she's prohibited unless both of them give them a get. The Gemara is going to have to discuss this. Rashi tells us. So that case of Mekudeshes ve'ena Mekudeshes is going to be a dispute in the Gemara. So if she's a daughter of an Israelite to a Kohen, or a Kohen to an Israelite, then she's not going to be able to eat from the Truma. So now we'll stop here for today, and if anybody has any questions, we'll be happy to address them. God willing, we'll take this up again at 8 o'clock. Any questions?